you ready?
Yeah.
This is the Ross Kaminsky Show.
You're a great American.
Now, Ross Kaminsky.
Come on, man.
On Denver's talk station, 630 KHOW.
Come on, man. Oh, my gosh, Joe. We got a lot to do this morning. We got some great... I've got actually some audio that I want to share with you over the course of the show today, that a lot of different interesting stuff. I want to give you a sense of what happened yesterday and what's going to go on today in Washington, D.C. I don't spend too much time talking about the nuts and bolts of party machinations and things like that, but there are some very interesting things that happened yesterday. So get these two women, Republican congresswomen, who have been the center of some controversy for very different reasons. One, Liz Cheney, who is the number 3 ranking member of the House, and she was one of, I believe it was 10 Republican House members who voted yes on the impeachment of Donald Trump a couple months ago. Was it a couple months? A month ago. And so a lot of the Trump wing of the Republican Party, and in fact, President Trump himself, has been pushing to have her removed from her leadership position. So that's one, and we'll get to what happened there in a minute. Matt Gaetz of Florida, a guy who, on the rare occasion when you actually hear him just talk about policy, actually can sound rational and thoughtful and intelligent, but has decided that he's not interested in sounding like any of those things anymore, actually went to Wyoming. He's a congressman from Florida, and actually a rather junior congressman from Florida, but he went to Wyoming essentially to campaign against Liz Cheney in Wyoming. He also did an interview, I think it was the day before yesterday, with Steve Bannon, who looks creepier by the day. He's got a show called The War Room. And in this interview, Matt Gaetz said, "We have the votes to remove Liz Cheney as the head of the Republican conference. We have the votes to remove her. We're just afraid that leadership is going to find a way to not have the vote." All right, again, I'm going to come back in a moment to what happened. And then the other woman who's been a center of controversy in the Republican House caucus is Marjorie Taylor Greene, Greene with an E on the end, freshman congresswoman, just recently got into office from northwestern Georgia, from a very, very Republican district. It's something like plus 27, right? It's more Republican than any district in Colorado, than any congressional district in Colorado. It's one of those places where whoever wins the primary is going to win the general election, 99 times out of 100. And Marjorie Taylor Greene has been a center of controversy because she's a lunatic, and because she has done things like supported tweets that suggested that Nancy Pelosi should be shot in the head, supported tweets and Facebook posts saying that the Sandy Hook shooting didn't happen, that the mass shooting in Las Vegas, where 58 people, I believe, died, was really just a false flag designed to get people to support more gun control legislation. She did that whole thing about how the fires, the Camp Fire, it's called, the capital C, in California a couple years back, that killed 70 people and destroyed 1,000 homes or something like that, that was, she was theorizing that it may have been caused by lasers in space owned by Jews. She's all about QAnon. And she's a lunatic, easily manipulated, anti-Semitic idiot who is an embarrassment to this country. And she was named recently to the House Education and Labor Committee, that's one committee, and the House Budget Committee. Now, I do have to say, it seems particularly odd and wrong to assign to the Education Committee somebody who suggests that the Sandy Hook school shooting didn't actually happen and that the people involved with that on television were actors. I mean, it's stupid that she's in Congress, but, you know, what are you going to do? It's Northwest Georgia, and they're going to vote whoever they're going to vote in. I mean, gosh, Alabama nominated Roy Moore. The Republicans in Alabama nominated Roy Moore. So you can't be surprised that the Republicans a couple states away give us this kind of person. But she's a huge Trump supporter, and lots of Trump supporters love her. And the main thing going on with Marjorie Taylor Greene that is so interesting, and I've talked about it just a little yesterday, is that even though I think most members of the Republican Party know that she's a fool, they are circling the wagons around her in a very major way. Not all of them, but lots of them, saying simply, we cannot let the Democrats get away with punishing a Republican. And the argument is, the Democrats will never be satisfied. If they punish her and get her out of the way, they'll just pick someone else to go after. And that's certainly true. In fact, before they got to Marjorie Taylor Greene, which is to say, before all of this information about her previous insanity came out, and I don't know why it didn't come out during the election cycle, but most of this stuff wasn't known to the public during the election and during her primary. So before this stuff came out, it seemed like the Democrats' target was actually Colorado's Lauren Boebert. And when they move Greene out of the way a little bit, they'll keep coming after Lauren Boebert, and they'll just keep coming after one Republican after another. And I get that argument. Democrats will never stop. They don't just want to win, they want to destroy their opponents. The radical left has always been like that. That's why there were gulags, and that's why there were the killing fields, and that's why there was the Great Leap Forward in the Cultural Revolution, in which millions of people died. It's just what people on the left do. The only reason that I'm not in an education camp right now is because we still live in a slightly free country, and I have several really excellent 300 blackout rifles that I'm pretty good at handling. So I get the idea of wanting to defend any Republican against the Democratic mob. I really do. I also get the idea that Kurt Schlichter was tweeting back and forth with me about yesterday, where he said, basically he said, apologizing makes you look weak. And what he's talking about there is that yesterday we learned, and I'm going to get back to Liz Cheney, I promise. Yesterday, we learned that Marjorie Taylor Greene apologized. I'm going to go to thehill.com for this. Marjorie Taylor Greene apologized for her past controversial remarks and embraced the QAnon conspiracy theory during a heated closed-door GOP conference meeting, and this does involve Cheney too, and received a standing ovation at one point from a number of her colleagues. Greene told her colleagues that she made a mistake by being curious about Q. She wasn't curious. She was just all in. Right? Oh, I made a mistake being curious about Mein Kampf and joining the Hitler Youth. Sorry. I was just curious when I said all those things about Jews. I was just curious. She said she told her children she learned a lesson about what to put on social media, according to two sources in the room. Yes, don't put things on social media that will embarrass you, even if you believe them, I'm sure is what she said. Or maybe she said, if you're going to post anti-Semitic and lunatic stuff on social media, make sure you do it under a false name. That's probably a good lesson for Marjorie Taylor Greene. If it sounds from the tone of my voice that I don't like her very much, let me just say it's because I'm massively understating how much I can't stand her and how much she is everything that is wrong with the Republican Party and with politics today. Now, I'm not saying that the Republican Party is everything wrong that's wrong with politics today. The Democrats are destroying this country, and they're going to keep doing it every single day. And the squad, AOC, I mean, Joe freaking Biden, who even Axios had to note the other day, campaigned as a moderate and is already governing as a very aggressive far leftist. It's all bad. But I'm just talking about Republicans for the moment because they had this meeting yesterday. Marjorie Taylor Greene also denied that she knew what Jewish space lasers were. Now, I would point out regarding the Jewish space lasers, regarding some of the other stuff that Greene did, some of the other things were either liking a Facebook post or retweeting a Facebook post, but just going along with moronic things that other people said. The thing about Jewish space lasers was a very long, rambling paragraph that she herself wrote. She didn't just forward someone else's. Now, and just to be fair to Marjorie Taylor Greene, because even lunatics deserve fairness, she didn't use the term Jewish space laser, but the rest of us are. What she talked about was lasers in space that just happened to be owned by Jews. And the proxy for Jews with all of these QAnon, I almost just swore on the radio, the proxy for Jews is the Rothschilds, right? So whenever you hear somebody mention the Rothschilds, and there are also all these stupid conspiracy theories out there about the Rothschilds owning the Fed and a bunch of nonsense like that. The Rothschilds and to a substantial extent George Soros, although it's not quite the same because George Soros really is a bad dude, but they're both used as proxies for the word Jews. The Rothschilds are doing this underhanded, sneaky thing that we don't quite understand. That means we hate Jews. It's what it always means. When you hear somebody talk about, do the Rothschilds own this or do that, you should correct them, castigate them, and or never talk to them again because they are the lowest form of life, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. Don't know how her hair is still blonde after clearly she crawled out from under some rock. So she got out, she stood up and said that she didn't know what Jewish space lasers were, even though she wrote the thing. And she got a standing ovation from some members of her caucus. Now, she didn't apologize for everything. She just, slightly backed off in a way that nobody actually believes. She did say that she felt nothing she said would ever be good enough for the media or Democrats, according to one source in the room, and I think she's right about that. So the question that was at hand yesterday was whether to remove Greene from the committees that she's on. And I'm going to say today what I said in yesterday's Ross report, and that is, as a matter of ethics, she should not be on any committee, and there is nothing that says she should be on any committee. But as a matter of politics, given the willingness of the most MAGA part of the MAGA crowd that is a big part of the Republican base right now, given their support of her, it puts Kevin McCarthy in a really tough position. If he does the right thing and removes her from committees, he's going to just get it from both barrels, and it might substantially reduce the chance of him being able to become Speaker of the House if Republicans take back the House in 2022, which is fairly likely. And that would be a perfect example of the Peter Principle, by the way. The Peter Principle being that you rise to the level of your incompetence, right? You keep getting promoted. You do okay at a job, you get promoted. You do okay at another job, you get promoted. And that keeps happening until you get to a job that you suck at and you don't get promoted again. Now, you can't really get promoted from being president of the United States, but clearly Joe Biden is an example of the Peter Principle. So is Kevin McCarthy. one of the most overrated members of Congress, as far as I can tell. But he wants to be Speaker of the House, and he probably will be, all things being equal. But if he starts going after MAGA Republicans, even if they're much crazier than normal MAGA Republicans, he's going to have some trouble. He might lose some votes. He might have trouble with fundraising. But he's got a little lucky, because while he decided not to remove Marjorie Taylor Greene, who's hashtag MTG now on Twitter, she's got her own 3 letters like AOC, the Democrats are going to bail him out, because the Democrats are going to vote to remove her from those committees. So McCarthy wins now. He doesn't have to remove Marjorie Taylor Greene from the committees himself, but the Democrats will do it for him, so there will be less of her being visible to be hung around the neck of every other Republican. And that's probably going to happen today, that they will vote to remove her from committees. And they should. She's got no guaranteed right to be on committees. It's not the same thing as trying to expel someone from Congress. All right, so let me do a minute now or so on Liz Cheney. So Liz Cheney got up in this big meeting yesterday and defended herself. She said, several members have asked me to apologize for the vote, meaning her vote in favor of impeachment. They've asked my colleagues who also voted to impeach to apologize for the vote. I owe you honesty. I owe you the truth. I cannot do that. It was a vote of conscience. It was a vote of principle, a principle on which I stand and still believe. Some people have said I should apologize for my statement or for the timing or the content of it. I tell you again, I cannot do that. I believe that my oath, I believe that all of our oaths is more important than politics or partisanship or political pressure. I do too. So, Big Mouth Matt Gaetz, who had just said on Steve Bannon's show that they've got the votes to remove Liz Cheney, and said his fear is simply that leadership would find a way not to have the vote. Liz Cheney insisted on the vote. Now, this was a secret ballot, so you can try to determine for yourself, your guess is as good as mine, what that meant in terms of how people voted differently than if the vote weren't secret. But in a 145 to 61 vote, they voted to keep Liz Cheney as the Republican conference chairwoman. Much more than a 2-to-1 margin. So much for Big Mouth Matt Gaetz. I guess the establishment won yesterday. We'll be back.
If you missed it earlier, we have your chance to win $1,000.